second critical choice I made was to commit to a two-way agreement. For me, this agreement, it was a near contractual agreement, was between me and my sister at the time that she took me into her home. But since then, I've really reflected, and I actually work with teams on two-way agreements because we enter into two-way agreements all the time, informally and formally. What I experienced is the power of committing. That when both parties come together with the mutual expectation and desire for a positive outcome, we're in this for a positive outcome, that when we both commit to actions that may start as I have to, can transform to I want to. At least that was my experience, and that it transformed to I want to. I think the idea of two-way agreements are tending to be more front and center now, even when I think about employers and the workforce and everything that's happening. But will you share your perspective on two-way agreements and an agreement that you've committed to? If you would share what that was, and what did you give and what did you get?
So this may be a little bit different than what you're thinking, but it's one I find interesting. It goes back to that novel that I mentioned earlier. And the two-way agreement I made with myself was, I'm going to write something that I know is going to suck. It is not going to be good, right? But in order to see that I can do it, I've got to do it. So I've got to say, can I write, give or take, 250 pages of coherent prose with characters on an arc, with a plot, with things that happen? Can I actually do that? But I had to do it in a way that I said, I know, because again, having written for a long time and knowing that you just don't sit down one day and say, oh, I'm inspired. Let me pop out the great American novel. That I would have to, I was committing to getting better and being willing to put the work in to be bad until I could be better. And so I've yet to tackle the second novel which is okay. It's because I wound up making this transition professionally, where I'm now writing nonfiction. That's what I've been doing a lot of, in addition to speaking and teaching, for the last 15 years. And so I've got the idea for the next novel or set of novels that will come, but that's okay, because again, to write a book length anything is intimidating. And so I think that was the two-way agreement was, I'm going to, I agree to do it bad until I get good. And so that was, I think, really helpful, and still have that novel tucked away, and I've read it and it's really bad. But that's, again, you don't get up to the top of a ski slope and say, oh, okay, here I go, first run, I'm going to be ready for the Olympics. You're going to fall down a whole bunch. So that was the agreement that came to mind when I first heard you talk about this.
And in that agreement, if I play this back, agreeing to committing to be bad until you're good would mean that your commitment is still going, that there's a second book in there that you're going to write, because you said, because you didn't say you got to good on the first one.
Right.
So the commitment is still going.
The commitment is still there. You'll have me back when I publish it, and we'll have another conversation.
And did you? Yes. Yes, 100%, 100%. And then I just want to ask a couple of details. If this is front and center to your mind, if it's not, that is okay.
Okay.
When you made the commitment of, I'm going to write a book that sucks, was there actual accountability points that you put in place for yourself that said, I am doing this and this and this in order to write this book? Like smaller accountability points within that two-way agreement.
So there were, in that I gave myself a rough deadline by which I wanted to do it, and then I had to commit to writing a certain amount, a certain number of words, a certain amount of research, all the steps that go into putting together a book. You've got to have some discipline around that, and it definitely requires discipline. And so going through and then actually sharing it with some people to say, okay, this is what I've got. What do you think? Which is the first scary thing to do that. I actually ultimately wound up sharing it with the gentleman who's now my agent for my nonfiction work. I was actually showing it to a literary agent. That's a really scary thing, And he confirmed that it sucks. But he's okay with the rest of the other work that I do.
And
So
then you were like, great. You know what? That was my goal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I win.
Great. Nailed it.
I
That was
win.
my objective.
And now I have
Right.
such amazing appreciation. And I know actually my upstairs neighbor is a novelist, and see how much work goes into that, because it actually I think is much harder than writing nonfiction, because you've got to create that story. It isn't that you go find the story and tell the story. You actually have to create it and create a lot of backstory, and it's just an enormous amount of work and a lot of rewriting. And that's the thing that really is horrible about writing, at least for me, is the writing. The first draft is actually relatively easy for me because I'm good with words. But having to go back and find the problems, rehash, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. But you have to. It's the only way it comes out to be worth anybody else reading.
Wow, I'm sure it's just such a craft and such a lift. My just like a little veer, Joe, my husband, wanted to be a writer. So he's not 50 yet. He's almost 50. So maybe he will plant his flag at some point and say, I am a writer. And he wanted to be a writer. And I always feel like, oh my gosh, did family and all the things that get in the way of following the dream or your aspiration or what you really identify with. I mean, I listen to you and I can't help but think of Joe, and that one of the things that I know just really holds true to him. And, he's kind of lost his way there for a little bit. So
there's still time.
We might have a part 3 where Joe is doing something. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Choose and Become interview series. To check out more episodes, go to www.trishkendall.com/podcast, or go to any of your favorite podcast channels, including YouTube, under Trish Kendall Speaks, and you'll find this interview and more. Choose and become.